I'm Fernando Guerra, professor and director of the Center for the Study of Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount University and moderator of the Center's Urban Lecture Series. This year marks the culmination of several important events for our city. In addition to this being the 10th annual lecture series the Center has organized, it's also the university's 100th anniversary of serving Los Angeles with its educational experience. Also this year, the city will remember the tragedy of the 1992 riots that occurred 20 years ago. As Angelenos, we should not forget both the physical and emotional scars these disturbances had on our city. For this reason, the Center for the Study of LA is sponsoring a survey of Los Angeles residents and their attitudes and opinions over the last 20 years. This survey will assist our faculty, students, and policymakers to better understand Los Angeles. Since no picture is complete without looking at the past, present, and future, the topic of this year's lecture series is 20 years after the riots, where is LA now? Where we hear from several of the city's current leaders, as well as those running for mayor of Los Angeles in the 2013 election. The series is important for several reasons. It provides an interdisciplinary education to hundreds of students at Loyola Marymount University, and it brings together top government officials, business and community leaders, and students, and the general public to discuss pressing issues facing Los Angeles and solutions to the city's problems. We hope you enjoyed today's panel. For more information about the Center for the Study of LA, its research studies, or upcoming panels, please visit our website at www.lmu.edu/CSLA. Welcome to Loyola Marymount University. I'm Fernando Guerra, professor and director of the Center for the Study of Los Angeles. We are going to have a conversation with the 41st mayor of Los Angeles, the Honorable Antonio Villaraigosa. We all know the story, a son of Los Angeles, union activist, organizer, civic activist, got elected to the state legislature, became a leader there, speaker of the state assembly, went into the private sector, and of course was recruited to come back into public service, first on the city council, then elected mayor in 2005, re-elected with overwhelming numbers in 2009, now serving into the 8th year, and so he served 7 years. And we're here to talk about all kinds of different issues, but mostly about education. He's certainly known as the transportation mayor. He's known as the mayor that brings Los Angeles together. He's known as the mayor that projects Los Angeles beyond the city to the region, the state, the nation, and even internationally. But education is our topic today. Mr. Mayor, education, it's not formally part of the job description. You have no formal power. You have no control over their budget, no control over their curriculum, no control over anything they do. Why do you want to be involved in education?
Well, I think the question is, why have we been involved? And I think the answer is real simple. If you look at a great neighborhood, it's anchored by a great neighborhood public school. If you look at a great world-class global city like LA, we've got to have great public schools. It's as simple as that. The public schools have always been the great equalizer. It's the road to the opportunity America, the American dream that we all know and love and appreciate. I say often that I went to Catholic school for a big part of my life, and it was certainly a Catholic school and my mom that gave me the foundation. But I was kicked out of Catholic school and went to a public school, and public schools are the places of second chances. And our schools, when I got elected, were failing. They were failing. They were failure factories. When you look at the fact that our dropout rate was more than 50%, and in some school parts of the city, 60 and 65. When you look at the fact that 80% of the kids were scoring at the bottom 20 percentile, there wasn't a sense of urgency in this town. There was too much in the way of finger pointing, parents pointing to teachers, teachers pointing to parents, mayors saying, it's not my job. And I refused to accept that paradigm. And notwithstanding the fact that I don't have control like they do in New York, in Chicago, in Philadelphia, in New Orleans, in Boston, in cities across the country increasingly, I said, I'm going to do this. And so early on, we went to the legislature to get support for a partnership.
So you got elected in 2005. When you say early on, are we talking 2005, 2006?
In the 2005-06 legislative year. So in the spring of 2006, I went to the legislature. I asked them to be able to veto the appointment of the superintendent. There was a great deal of opposition. We won narrowly in both houses. The governor signed the bill. The school district sued. We lost at the trial court and then on appeal. We lost because under our Constitution there's supposed to be bifurcated government in terms of the school district and the city. But we didn't stop there.
So you're saying that the state constitution prohibits a city and a school district being in one, even though historically the LA Unified was part of the city up until about the 30s or what have you.
It was the state constitution and the chart and both the city charter. So we needed to change both. So we lost at the trial court and on appeal. Spent about $1 million trying to, to vindicate this legislation. We had a plan B. We decided to get involved in supporting a reform board that would put in a superintendent that was focused on improving our schools and setting the highest standards. We raised about $5 million to challenge what was a monopoly of one group essentially controlling the school board elections and school board members. It took some time. We were able in the next year to elect that board. And let me share with you some of the things that have happened since
let me go
the
back
election.
to in terms of the sequence though, because we say you've been in office 7 years, you're into your 8th year. The first year in terms of education, you really spent in the courts. You had very little impact on that. As a matter of fact, you were trying to fire or replace the existing superintendent. And I'm assuming that he was not very responsive to the things that you wanted to do.
He wasn't because, well, I mean, initially, I don't know if you remember, those of you who are around, some of you are still in college, but those of you who are around, we were debating whether or not there was a 50% dropout rate. We had battles in the newspapers and in the community about, they were engaging in sophistry and essentially denying that the rate was where it was. We were able to prove after 5 different studies that in fact it was at 50% and that we were correct when we said that there were as many failing schools. When I took over in 2005, we had 1/3 of our schools, of the 700 plus schools in LA, 1/3 of them were at 650 and below on the Academic Performance Index, which means they were failing.
The API that people typically refer to.
Today, only 10%. So we've gone from, in these 7 years, we've gone from 33% that were failing to 10%. The number of schools at 800 today versus then. We've doubled the number of schools in LA Unified that are at the state goal on the Academic Performance Index of 800 and above. We've doubled the number of charters in that period of time and quintupled the number of successful charters over 800. We have charters in South LA at 800 and above.
So on every measure that you have, there's been success over the last 5 or 6 years. Is there any area where quantitatively we haven't moved up?
Well, there's a number of areas where we need to accelerate that improvement. I'm not in any way satisfied with where we're at, but let me share a couple of things that we were able to do with this reform board. You're right, we replaced the superintendent.
So let me go, so the first year you spend with legislation, then the courts, that doesn't happen, then you go political in terms of trying to replace the
Plan B.
Plan B.
Well, Plan A was the legislature, Plan B with the courts, Plan C was electing a reform board.
So that's just 2007 elections.
And then we had to replace the superintendent. I mean, these were battle royales, again, without the power to really effectuate, it's only indirectly. And then we replaced the superintendent with Ramon Cortines, who was my deputy mayor. very successful superintendent in San Francisco and Pasadena, in LA at one time, and I believe in New York.
So he was working in your office, almost superintendent in waiting.
Well, he was working to essentially put together the plan to reform these schools, to give parents and families more options, to expand the number of charters, to adopt our partnership schools. So now we're talking 2007, 2008. We took over at that time 10. It's now 22 schools. We took on the lowest performing schools in the city, the most violent middle school in the city. We took on the schools that were failing by every measure, and we've improved over time. We've outpaced the school district and the state in these schools. They're safer today. We have a higher attendance rate. But you asked if we were satisfied. No, we won't be satisfied until the vast majority, if not every one of our kids are graduating. We won't be satisfied until LA public schools are among the best anywhere in the nation. What we're going through, frankly, we're not the only school district. If you look at urban school districts around the country, they're all very similar to us. But they're not just sitting there and throwing up their hands and saying all is peachy-dory and okay. They're challenging the school district. One of the ways that we, as an example, we have 120 schools now, the 700 plus schools, that are in some form of remediation, that are in a process of we've set strong standards for them to improve. You know, we've got my partnership schools. We have the schools that charters have gotten through public school choice. Public school choice was something I asked the board to do, and what we said was every failing school, every new school ought to compete for an operator. You know, let's see, you know, in a district where for so long we've thrown up our hands and said, these kids can't learn, well, let's compete. Let's see what we could do.
Who opposed you? The union. Isn't it ironic that this union organizers for the teachers union, that's what you used to do, that your biggest opposition to many of these issues that you're talking about were that same teachers union. When you looked across, were you looking at an Antonio Villaraigosa of 20 years ago?
I think when I looked
when you were negotiating with the teachers union.
There's no question, there are a lot of things broken. It's not just the union.
Yeah, but what would Antonio Villaraigosa in 1984 think of Antonio Villaraigosa in 2009?
He'd probably be upset with Antonio Villaraigosa in 2009. But you know, and first of all, let me clarify and finish that statement. I don't believe that teachers union is the biggest problem. I think we're all part of the problem. The universities are part of the problem, that they're not really developing teachers who are ready to learn, to teach rather. And they're teaching, you know, an old model, and you know, they need to do a better job. You know, political leaders are the problem when they say it's not my job. You know, yeah, I don't have it in my job description. I'm okay with all these failing schools. You know. But they are the most powerful, the unions are the most powerful defenders of a broken system. We're all a problem. You know, if these taxes don't pass in November, we're going to be below Mississippi in per pupil spending. We're going to be 50th. We're already 47th. You know, we failed to invest in our schools. And where I would challenge Antonio Villaraigosa of 20 years ago, and even Antonio Villaraigosa in the legislature, money's not the only answer, everybody. We got to connect money to results. We're never going to convince the public to do more unless we can show that we're doing more with the money we've got. That's why we've got to reform our schools. That's why we've got to set the highest standards. We've done a number of things in these years, and many of them were done by my partnership schools. As an example, we challenged seniority because in our schools, we were losing 55% in some of our schools, 55% of our teachers. And the rest of the school district was losing 3%. And we went to the school district and the union to help us figure that out and said, Why are all the poor kids in the poorest schools of South LA disproportionately losing these number of kids? And what both of them told us is, it's the way it is. It's what the contract says. It's the state code. And I said, oh yeah? I went to court. I went to the ACLU. And that's the other thing we've done very differently than other cities. You know, in other cities, in New York and Chicago, they don't have the civil rights community with them. We convinced early on the civil rights community, this is the civil rights issue of our time. When you see when you hear, I think it's the Public Policy Institute, they talk about 2025, we're going to be 1 million down in the number of college graduates. It has everything to do with the achievement gap. It's because Latinos and African Americans are not graduating from high school in the numbers that they need to. If we don't fix that achievement gap, this state isn't going to compete. So, you know, different than the Antonio Villaraigosa of 20 years ago, I think we need more money. There's no question about it. But I think we need to tie money to results. We need more accountability. So some of the things that we've challenged seniority, and I think it's 40 some odd schools, now 45 schools are protected because they were disproportionately losing teachers. They can't lay them off.
So that was the whole idea of
that was
last hired, first
the
fired.
Reed case. It was the Reed case.
So you lost the case when you wanted to take over, but you won this particular case,
that
Reed versus California.
And we also were a friend of the court in another case, Doe versus Dacey, where we've said something simple. In a school district where 97% of the teachers get a satisfactory evaluation, and many of them will tell you that a principal hasn't been in their room to evaluate them. All we said was, let's put an evaluation system that truly measures success, that has student growth over time, which you probably have read about in the Times and other places, which says, you know, where does the students start? Where do they end up? In-class observation, student input. You know, I dropped out of high school, and when you'll see kids, and I dropped out of high school in no small part because when I got kicked out of Cathedral, they put me in basic reading and math classes when I went, and upholstery class when I went to Roosevelt. And you know, kids, they walk out with their feet. You'll see kids that go to their first period because they're actually, you know, engaged in learning something, and don't go to their second and third period because they're not. So it includes student evaluations, and then finally their contribution to the overall community. You know, districts around the country are adopting evaluations like this. We sued on that. We won. We're looking at other lawsuits because Sacramento is very difficult to change legislation. You should know, as I'm speaking, after Miramonte, we all know what happened there. All we said, because it's so difficult to fire even a pedophile who's a teacher, it's so difficult to fire them. All we said was, let's develop a process that allows the expediting to dismiss a pedophile or someone selling drugs to kids. Guess what?
This is the Padilla Bill.
The Padilla Bill.
That's the Senate.
It's getting blocked in Assembly Education. It doesn't have the votes. The Democrats are all walking away because they don't want to challenge the teachers' union. And that's what's broken. You know, I tell people, you know why the country's so evenly divided? Because it's broken on the left and it's broken on the right, both. You know, you got powerful interests that put the interest of adults before kids. And I'm trying to figure out a middle way. And I'm saying, hey, look, I'm still pro-union. I still pro-due process. But I believe that these kids deserve a shot. You know, in my schools, and I know it sounds corny, but I expect all of my people to do this. They don't always do it like I do it. But when I walk in, whether it's an elementary school, a middle school, or a high school, I always say to them, and I make them look me in the eye. I say, do you believe in you? And they have to respond, I believe in me. The reason why we're doing this is because we believe in these kids. We believe in that they can learn. And when we hear all these excuses, and you hear them all the time, they can't learn because their parents are English language learners and they didn't go to college. That was me. They can't learn because they're foster kids, or they grow up in broken homes, or because they're poor. Well, I grew up in broken home, alcoholism, domestic violence. You know, we were poor. I can read and write. All the excuses you hear from adults about these kids are just that, excuses. So, you know, would I agree with Antonio Villaraigosa 20 years ago? No. It's because you grow, you develop new experiences, and you realize the world's a lot grayer. I actually think that the key to the future is getting the teachers union and teachers empowered and a part of the movement. That's why we got behind a new contract. That's another thing that's happened in the last 7 years. The teachers union has a contract that says that teachers locally can apply for relief from the collective bargaining agreement and more flexibility, particularly in failing schools. And in fact, we're requiring that now in schools that are failing. What we've said is, for the first time, it's happened under this, over these last 7 years, if your school's failing, you're going to have to figure out a plan to change it. And we've got 120 schools in that situation right now as we speak.
How do you respond to people who say, look, on every metric, LA Unified has improved, okay? But that's also the case for many school districts in LA County and throughout the state, that this would have happened anyway. It's just what's happening right now.
It's actually happening at a faster rate here, and there's no question that it's true. There has been improvement throughout the state. But you know, you look at Florida, and I'm not, you know, I think we all know I'm a Democrat. I'm co-chair of President Obama's campaign. I'm unabashedly a progressive. I'm chairing the Democratic Party convention. But
hey, to be a progressive is to be pro-union.
Well, Jeb Bush, when he was governor of Florida, in the time that he was there, Florida, Latinos and African Americans in Florida were outdoing 36 states, 34 to 36 states. Not Latinos and African Americans in 34 to 36 states, the performance in those states. The fact is, we're going to have to adopt a lot of these reforms. We're going to have to set a higher bar. Yes, there's been improvement, but it's not enough.
Okay, so
not when you're losing the number of kids that we are. And you know, I did a PBS thing today, taping for a thing on schools, and one of the things they said, you know, when they're planning prisons, they look at third grade reading scores and third grade performance to do that. There's a real connection between educational failure and the overpopulation of people of color in institutions, penal institutions. There's a connection there. You know, when I was elected to the assembly, there were about 72,000 people in our prisons. A few years ago, we were up to about 170,000. It's now gone down because of realignment and other things. But when you look at that number and the disproportionate number that are of color, and you interview them, disproportionately they were truant, disproportionately they dropped out, disproportionately they can't read and write. This is the civil rights issue, the economic issue, and the democratic issue of our time. And you know, if you're going to ruffle feathers and upset people, so be it. Because at the end of the day, this is about LA and California and the nation actually competing with the rest of the world. I think we're now 25th in math around the world. Mm-hmm. And so when Tom Friedman talks about the world is flat and we're not competing, that means your sons that went to SC, my daughter who's at SC, my son who was at Princeton, they're not competing. These kids aren't competing with the top in the world.
Well, I also had a son that went to LMU, and he's competing.
Right. So. Yeah. But the kids who are failing, they're not competing with the bottom in the world. That's the threat to our democracy and our economy that we're facing. Now, having said that, where I still am with Antonio Villaraigosa, you know, I always say this. There is a correlation with how much we're investing in these kids. When I was going to schools in the 1960s, they were at the top. We were at the top 5 in per pupil spending, and we had the best schools. We just got to connect the funding to success and accountability. So that means we got to promote more highly effective teachers, better evaluations. We've got to put a lot more investment in principals and developing school leaders, because almost every single successful school has a school leader who's collaborative, who's, you know, making it run. When you see 99th Street School in Watts went up almost 100 points now, and is about to break 800, a partnership school about to break 800 in South LA, it's for one reason. They had Sherry there, and now Courtney. Sherry's now at Jordan. And I would encourage...
Are these the principals you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to go to Jordan High School. Recently, Sandy Banks went there. She's been there a bunch of times.
You're talking about the LA Times columnist.
Yes. You go to Jordan High School, we've only been there a year, and it's transformed. And I'm not going to tell you the API is going to go up 50 points in the first year, but it's safer. It's a different campus. Green Dot's on there, and we're collaborating with a charter, and then our kids are on there, the partnership schools, which is a traditional public school just run by us.
Using every single metric, there's been success, tremendous amount of progress. You have 1 year left, okay? What are the 3 things you need to do? And what happens within the context if the governor's initiative doesn't pass in November? Do the 3 things that you're going to do over the next year change?
The 3 things that we need
you're going to do about education.
Well,
I mean, number one,
we've got to move ahead to appropriately evaluate the talent, teachers and principals in our school district. That's something we need to do. In my partnership schools, we started the school report card. Now the district goes district-wide and has a school report card. I'm asking them to go further, and we're going to do the same starting this year, and that is we're going to put a grade on our report card. I tell people, you know, if it's good enough to have a grade on the restaurant you go to, why shouldn't we have a grade on our schools? Now, people say, well, people will get discouraged if they don't have a good grade. Well, kids get discouraged when they don't get a good grade. And what does that make them do? It encourages them to get a better grade. And the school district, we started the parent college. The school district is taking the parent college district-wide.
But that process has started already.
Yes.
You're just going to continue that and reinforce that. Okay. What else? Yeah, you better be careful.
Yeah, better be careful. Yeah. Fall down in front of everybody.
Right. So the governor's initiative, is it going to pass?
I hope so.
How about,
but you got to understand, it's not the answer. It's tinkering around the edges, everybody. Let's just be honest. We're still going to be, even if it passes.
You're supportive of it. You've endorsed it.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to endorse it. But, you know, I'm going a lot further. And this is where I hit the right. You know, we got to fix Prop 13. Prop 13 is broken. It does not benefit, looking at around this room, it does not benefit 90% of you. The fact is, it used to be that commercial property owners paid 60% of the freight of property bill in the state. Now they're paying 40%. They can sell property again and again through REITs, through these complicated, you know,
it doesn't trigger
funds,
a change of ownership.
And it doesn't trigger a change of ownership. We over-rely on the income tax, and we're raising that at the top. That is not a smart thing to do. We need to revamp our tax system to spread the taxes across the way. Let me give you an example. Some of the fastest growing part of the economy is the service economy, and we don't tax the service economy. Well, we got to start taxing the service economy, because you could spread out the sales tax in a smarter way, lower the corporate tax in the state, and have more money. Fix Prop 13 and have more money for schools than we do today. We should be at the top of the nation.
So are you for Molly Munger's initiative?
I'm not. Mostly because it has In every poll I've seen, it doesn't have the public support. I do think that she's on the right track. We've got to broaden the tax base, but I think there's another way to go. Think long. California Forward has looked at a number of these things that put us back on a smarter track, a better way to fund our schools and our universities. I mean, we're getting to a point, not just schools. Look what's happening at the community colleges, at the CSUs and the UCs today. Those used to be our competitive edge, everybody. But because of the draconian cuts, and today, I am sad and absolutely frustrated to tell you, they just cut Healthy Families. I authored Healthy Families in 1997. 900,000 kids were on Healthy Families. We're going to lose $200 million from the feds to gain $5 million to score it against the budget. I mean, and I might be wrong about that number, but it's a paltry number. It's a paltry number in comparison to what we'd be losing from the feds. And we're cutting, and we're not making the investments we need.
How do you make sure that the next mayor of Los Angeles maintains the momentum, prioritizes education the way you have?
You're going to make sure. Anybody that wants to be the next mayor of this town, that thinks they're going to get away with throwing up their hands and saying it's not my problem, it's too hard, I don't fund the schools, I don't have authority over the schools. Well, you know what? We should not and cannot accept that proposition.
So who are you going to support? Who are you going to support for
They're
mayor?
going to have to build on. I don't know who's running yet. I mean, you know, as I understand it, I just got word today that there are at least 2 people that are started to, who aren't in the race currently. We're starting to talk about a lot more than talk about getting in the race. I think it's fluid. Remember, people forget. When I ran in 2005, I announced after the Democratic Convention, there were already 5 candidates and an incumbent. And I started essentially in September, and I won the primary and I won the runoff. So there's plenty of time. You know, it's just, and right now, nobody's really watching. I mean, the focus, well, actually, nobody's even watching the presidential race until after Labor Day. And then people are going to be focused on that. And then we'll start seeing a lot of interest between November and March, and then March and May when there's a runoff.
So we were talking about grades earlier. So I think about the 3 different areas where you've done an incredible job. Obviously, education, public safety, crime, transportation. Give yourself a grade in each one of those areas.
Oh, I'll let you give me a grade. You know, those are nice questions, and I appreciate it. But you know,
I think that's a great question.
It's not for me to do. And honestly, what'll happen? You know, I'll get 1 grade when I leave. I'll get another grade 5 years after that, you know, and another grade when somebody's really looking at the facts over time. Well, you know, here's an example. I know we're not going to talk a lot about homelessness. I've done 2,200 units of permanent supportive housing for the homeless in 7 yeurs. That's 3 times more than the 12 years before me. Nobody knows it. They never write about it because they like writing about sensational things. But when they write history, someone's going to say that we've done what we've done in a 7-year period of time. So what's going to happen is people are going to feel one way right after you leave, and it's usually sayonara, see you later. And then, you know, a few years later, they feel a little differently.
I'm going to give you a grade.
All right.
Okay.
Give me a grade. It's nice to know.
I'm a professor. I give grades all the time. A lot of people aren't happy with them. But so anyway, at Loyola Marymount University, the Center for the Study of Los Angeles, we do an occasional poll here or there. In February, we did a poll, randomly selected 1,600 residents in the city of Los Angeles, and we asked them to grade you. Okay. In addition, we asked them to grade President Obama, Police Chief Beck, Governor Brown, Sheriff Baca, the LA City Council, which, by the way, flunked, and a couple of others. All right. You were number 2. Only President Obama scored higher than you. You scored higher than the governor. You scored higher than every other elected official that we put on there. So the city of LA is giving you a very good grade. And at least at Loyola Marymount University, you're on your way to graduating. Yeah. So.
You know, but I still hold to it. I mean, you know, look, there have been 5 polls in the last 3 months, and they all have around, you know, 52 to 56%. And the fact is, you know, half the people like you and half people don't. It's what happens, and particularly in the toughest recession, when we've had to make so many tough decisions, when I've had to challenge my friends. You know, I challenged, you know, Governor Walker. I believe in collective bargaining. I think what he tried to do is, and what he did successfully, is outrageous. I don't, you know, support that. And yet I'm pushing pension reform because our pensions aren't sustainable. And, you know, it doesn't make you popular. You see all these poster cards, Villaraigosa on vacation, and all he does is fly all over the world and, you know, doesn't care about the city and not minding the store and all the rest of it. You know, the fact is, these are tough times, and when you have so many people out of work, you expect people to be upset. But the one thing I think I have, the other thing that is different between me today and when I first got elected, I'm really not worrying about, you know, what people think, to be honest. I mean, we all want to be loved, but, you know, I look to the man in the mirror, and I look to my name, Villaraigosa, and I'm very proud of that name. It's a name that stands for something. So, you know, sometimes your friends agree with you, sometimes they don't, sometimes your constituents do. It's just what comes with the turf.
So what do you do in terms of positioning yourself in the mayor's office to not be, quote unquote, a lame duck in the last year? I mean, you dealt a little bit with this when you were a speaker, but for a very short time. This is different. How are you going to do that?
You did it right on the head. One person started to write something about that last year, and I laughed. You know, I knew that wasn't going to be the case. We're going to be working. I have some really talented young people that work for me, and not so young people. I call them, the guys I call son, and the women I call mija, because I don't remember anybody's name, but I have some really talented people that have come from, you know, Penn and Berkeley and Stanford and UCLA and SC and Loyola Marymount and virtually, you know, Cal State and Northridge and just all over the country. We're going to work till 11:59 and 59 seconds on June 30th. We're going to be in that office. I was president of the Conference of Mayors. I'm chairing the Democratic Party convention. I'm immersed in virtually everything that happens in this town, and you know, I'm going to be there till it's all over. And then when it is, you said, who am I going to support? I can tell you, I'm going to support the winner. And I don't mean this to be facetious. Whoever's the next mayor, I'm going to be their biggest cheerleader. I'm going to be their biggest supporter. I believe in this town. Just like I believe in these kids, I believe in LA. And that's what, when I brought Xi Jinping over here, and you didn't, it was pretty amazing.
The vice president of China.
I bring the vice president, I mean, just to show you where we are today with the media. I bring the vice president, the next president of China, and there was almost no mention of it. You know, there was just none. That's where we are today. You know how we brought him here? I sold him the idea. You know, it's great to go to New York and Chicago. That's where President Hu Jintao had gone. He'd gone to Chicago, and of course they always go to DC. I said, come to LA. We move 44% of all the seaborne goods. This is the #1 destination point for the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Koreans. We're the gateway to the Pacific Rim. I said, come to a Laker game and you know, and let the American people see you as a regular guy. Whoever's the next mayor, if they send me to China, to Mexico, to Korea, to promote this city and the people in it, I'm going to do whatever they need me to do.
What are you going to do on July 1st, 2013?
You know, my staff hates me to say this because I say I'm going to ride into the sunset. So I won't say it anymore.
So that means you'll be coming right by Loyola Marymount.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You know, in fact, I was actually asking him, you know, about housing. But, you know, I know I want to write. We turn down probably 75% of the request to speak around the country because I just can't do it. So I'm going to probably speak, and not just here in the country, probably around the world. I'm going to have to make a living, so I'll probably do something. But I think that after all these years, you know, I've been majority whip in my first 3 weeks in office, and you know, was part of the leadership, and then majority leader 2 years later. And everybody says that I was elected speaker 4 years later, but it was actually 3 years after I got elected. I was elected in November of '94, right, and speaker in January of '98. So I think it's time for reflection. You know, I think when you act on the world this much, and I've been mayor, president, you know, virtually at a high level of leadership for a long time, I think you sometimes lose perspective because you're acting on the world so much and you're not thinking about it. You know, I'll be honest, I try to read books, but I don't read as much as I need to because you
sound like one of my students.
Because you're reading, well, because you're reading so much other and you're acting on the world. I mean, if you saw the number of calls I made today to the legislature on Measure R, on the Padilla Bill, to the Congress on Measure R, on the Surface Transportation Bill, I'm literally walking in like this. So I think it's time to take a little time out to think about.
Well, I like the reflect, and if you reflect, what do you regret the most in terms of the being mayor, in terms of the last 7 years? Now, if it's personal, I do have Father Welch here who can take confession, but just in terms of being mayor, what do you regret the most? What decision, what vote, what initiative?
I'm just going to mention one. It's the only one. The way I handled my breakup, obviously, was the one thing I regret the most, and the one thing I've asked.
You're talking about your marriage.
Yeah, my family and you know, my constituents.
You mean in terms of how you handled it publicly, or
the way I handled it? You know, I don't think I need to go to all the details, but I think that was probably
Father Welch will talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's what I regret the most. Everything else, you know, you do the best you can. You try to make it work in a way that you, again, looking at the man in the mirror, the way that you think the best way to move forward. I'll tell you one thing I do want to reflect on, including around education. I think there is a third way. I really do believe in the radical middle. I think what's broken is broken on the left and it's broken on the right. And I think it's more broken on the right, but it's broken both ways.
So what,
and that Padilla bill, the Padilla bill not getting out today, and I think it didn't get out today. Yeah. Somebody needs to let me know. They're waiting for one vote for a bill that's so simple, that says expediting the dismissal of a pedophile. You know, people selling drugs to kids. Those two things. I mean, come on, everybody. Yeah. That's where we are today. The left can't challenge their constituencies, and neither can the right. And that's why it's broken.
Come on, when you were speaker, you tell me that there wasn't a situation where you knew you should vote for something, but for the politics of the building, the Democratic, Republican, you had to hold something up and all that.
I put myself in all of that. Yeah. But I'll tell you, over the last years as mayor, I mean, I got the Conference of Mayors to take on seniority and tenure. I got them to take on pension reform. So that's on the, what one would argue, taking on the left. On the right, we've taken on comprehensive immigration reform. We took on the war. We said it wasn't that we need nation building at home, not nation building abroad. We got Democratic and Republican mayors to do that. We just passed by unanimous consent, very little debate except in favor, my motion to use Simpson-Bowles to take on the left and say, hey, Social Security and Medicare is not sustainable. We got to fix it. To take on the right, we got to close loopholes and we got to have enough revenue to fund the government. So, yeah, have I ever voted for things maybe not thinking they were perfect and did them anyway? Yeah, but that's the problem. And I think over time, particularly when you're a chief executive and you have to sit in jobs as a president, a governor, or a mayor of a, of what is essentially a country, you got to be able to call them like you see them. So, and I definitely feel that if we're going to fix what's broken across the country Fashioning that third way is critical.
Okay, let's
it
talk
used
about
to be,
that,
let me stop you for a second,
okay.
because here's something I did used to do back then. You know, it used to be that civility and diplomacy and compromise were actually valued. We loved the states people, not statesmen, but the men and women on both sides who were able to find the middle ground and fix things and move us forward. You don't have that anymore. All you have is people screaming at each other. All you have is people calling each other names. Compromise is you're looked down upon, you know, as some softy. So, you know, that's what I think we need to reflect on. And that's what I wanted to work on.
Okay, so just thinking about that.
I want to talk about education some more.
But here in LA, though, what would be the reform to try to create that radical middle? Now, if you had a magic wand and can do any reform, not meaning you can control LAUSD, because we're going to talk about that, but as your second one, because I know your first one would be LAUSD would be under the mayor's control.
Absolutely.
What would be what would be the second reform that you would change in terms of
the things we're doing now? We got to change the evaluation system.
No, but I'm talking about the city in terms of creating that radical middle, having that middle.
We got to fund government, everybody. I've had to cut 1/3 of the LA General Fund workforce. 1/3. We are so eviscerating the safety net at the city, the county, the state, and the federal government. At some point, I mean, the idea, this is one of 16 states where you need a 2/3 majority to pass taxes. I mean, you can't, it's almost impossible to fund the government. But I think one of the things I've said is, just like on the schools, part of why I'm pushing pension reform is because when you go to the people and ask them for money, you got to be able to tell them that you're doing everything you're possible to keep costs under control, that you're addressing the unsustainability of things like pensions and benefits, and that you're doing what you can to be more efficient. But in the end, and this is where I hit the right, you can't keep on cutting and expect, you know, all these services and, you know, the best, you know, schools and the safest cities when you just cut. No, part of what's happening in Europe today, if you're following Europe, is that Europe is taking a path of just cuts. You got to have stimulus too. 85% of the economists, so some of them are very conservative, some of them are very liberal. 85% of the economists say you can't just cut your way out of a recession. You also have to stimulate. So you have to stimulate and cut. And we're not doing enough in the way of the stimulating. So educationally, I think one of the other things that I'll want to do in the next year, again, and which is why we agreed to do this with you, is I think it's really important that the electorate involve themselves and insist to the people running for mayor, whoever that they are. You can't just tinker around like you used to and do after-school programs. You know, Tom Bradley started them. There's 180 of them. 60 of that 180 have happened since I was mayor. That's tinkering. I don't even talk about that I've done 1/3 of the after-school programs. That's a little thing. You gotta actually roll up your sleeves and get involved in managing reform, in pushing the school board, in getting the public support to improve these schools. So that's what I intend to spend the next year doing.
So
that means I'm going to raise a lot of money
yeah.
to help elect a progressive, reform-minded board, because they actually
and that's also on the election in March 2013. Right after you do that, around that time, President Obama in the second term comes to you and says, Antonio, you've done a great job as mayor of LA. You did a great job at the National Convention. I want you to be in my cabinet. You could be Secretary of Education, Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Which one would you take?
You know,
not all three, Antonio. You have to choose one.
I'll just be candid. It is being filmed. You know, right after the president won in November, we had fires. He called me on the fires. He was the president-elect, and he started to ask the question. And before he did, I said, with all respect, I'm mayor of LA. I love my job. And then he laughed and he says, yeah, and I know you want to be governor too. And so we joked, and I said, no, I want to be mayor. I love this job. I want to finish what I started.
I'm talking about July 1st, 2013.
Yes. I'm not interested right now.
It's a hypothetical question.
I want to finish this. I want to finish this job, and then I think I'm due some time for reflection.
But don't you think that if people think you're going to be governor, U.S. senator, or in the cabinet, it allows you to remain a little bit more effective?
That's why my staff doesn't like me to say I'm riding into the sunset, because that's true. But if anybody knows me, they know this. Never count me out. So I don't need to tell people that I might be governor, or I might be a senator, or I might be this or that. I'm just going to focus on finishing my job. Yes, you know, you're open to opportunities, but I think the best opportunity for me is to reflect. And there is one other thing. I do want to reach out to like-minded people around the country, because I think there's a hunger for challenging this broken partisanship. I think people realize all you get with polarization is gridlock. You get nothing else. So even if you agreed with them or agreed with them, you're not vindicating what you agree on, so figuring out the compromise, the common path that we could chart, whether it's on pension reform, whether it's on reforming our schools, whether it's on looking at our broken tax system both at the state and at the federal level, whether on making investments in education and infrastructure, I just got to believe that there is a lot of hunger out there for that. And so that's why I said I want to write, and I want to speak, and I want to drum up that.
But it's a little difficult for you as chair of the Democratic Convention. I've seen you on Meet the Press, I've seen you on CNN, and they always put you across from someone who's a spokesperson for the Republicans or Mitt Romney. And then they start saying certain things, and you're expected to say certain things. And you have to kind of fall into that division. How do you handle that?
As delicately as you can. I mean,
because if you don't handle it a certain way, the campaign's not gonna ask you to do that anymore.
You know, I'm just working hard. I've made it pretty clear to the campaign. I'm mayor of LA, first and foremost. I have my own opinions. I charted a path very early on marriage equality. I've been supporting marriage equality since 1994. Under my speakership, all of the civil rights stuff started. I did the first anti-discrimination bill, the first domestic partnership registry, the anti-discrimination bill in schools. I'm mayor of LA. That's my first job. And so if I have an opinion that's different than folks, I'm always very respectful that someone, including the president, might have a different opinion. But I speak my opinion because that's the only one I can control.
It's pretty impressive when you think that you have this role at the Democratic Convention when you were working very hard on behalf of Hillary Clinton against Obama in the last primary.
Actually, it wasn't against Obama. It was for Hillary.
Okay.
And that's a difference. I watched him, and I was mesmerized by his ability to communicate and his growth through that campaign. And I'll tell you, I am a big supporter of President Obama. He's had to lead this country in the toughest economic times since the 1930s. Any history majors here? If you're a history major, you know, you and I are. If you're a history major, you know when it took us till the war to get out of the Depression. It took us to more than a decade to get out of the Depression. And we've gained, more jobs in the last year than they did 8 years under President Bush. And it was those policies that got us here. So I think people aren't taking into account the magnitude of the crisis that he faced before him and the way he's tried to do this at a time of partisanship. I mean, even the Democrats have been upset with him because he's tried to find a middle ground sometimes. So I'm a big President Obama fan, and I'm going to work hard for him. But having said that, I also believe strongly that he was right when he said, we've got to figure out how we work better across the aisle. Yeah. It's not working the way we're doing it now.
Your daughter is an undergraduate. Yeah. She comes...
My youngest daughter.
Your youngest daughter.
I have three. 19, she's at SC, 34 and 37. Yeah,
you mentioned SC already. We know that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, your son went to SC.
Yeah, but he was not my favorite son. My favorite son came to LMU.
Yeah, the one that's still getting an allowance, right?
Yeah. Well, he works hard for that allowance. So she comes to you and she says, Dad, what should I do? I'm thinking, what profession, what should I do? Where should I be in 5, 10 years from now? What do you say to her?
I would follow your dreams, follow what's in your heart, what you think you're good at. Don't think about, Dad is, I want to give her a framework.
Okay, let me change this question. Wait. Okay, Dad, I want to go into politics. I want to be an elected official. What do you think?
I would support her. I wouldn't encourage it, but I would support her. Well, because I talk about the 5 Ps, of public service, and I believe very much that it starts with policy. You want to change something, and I'm going to get to the point.
Well, give us the 5 Ps now, because I want to use this in a lecture.
It starts with policy. You want to change something. There's something you want to fix. There's something that you think is broken. Politics. I tell people I laugh when I hear these politicians say I love policy and I don't like politics. Well, go get another job. Politics is about selling the policy. It's about building the coalition. It's about educating people around your idea that you want to change or improve. Persistence. The reason why you don't have change is because it's hard. So I tell people the good ones are persistent. They're dogged. They're determined. They don't give up. They fight till the end. Passion. If you don't have passion, go get another job. But finally, it's about people. Why do you want to change policy? Why are you so persistent? Why are you so passionate? Because you want to help people. So I always tell people that want to get involved, if you don't have those things, maybe you ought to go do something else. Now, I've seen people that are successful and they don't have all 5 of those, but I think the most successful people, they love people. I was shopping the other day. I never
stopped by immigration or no?
I was shopping the other day. I said I was shopping the other day, and at this kind of bargain store, and I was like, like when you got a sale and so I'm just shopping. This guy starts filming me, and I look at him, and I said, "Do you want to take a picture with me?" And he says, "No, I don't." And then he used an expletive, and he was very angry, and he started, getting very hostile. And my security came in, and so when that happened, this other guy came up to me and shook my hand and says, "Well, I like you, and I think you're a great mayor." And then this other guy came up and said, "I think you're a great mayor." And then this other people wanted to take a picture, and I say that for this reason: I love people. When people ask me if I'm offended by that, I'm not offended. I understand why people are upset. They're upset because of the economy, because something's happening in their family, because of whatever. They disagree with you on something. If you don't love people, particularly if you're mayor, even more than a legislator, this is the wrong job. So, I think what I would tell her, if you have those qualities and you really feel it in here, go do it. But if you don't just do it because your name is Villaraigosa or something. It's just, then you got to feel it in here. Whatever you're doing.
Yeah. What are you going to miss most about being mayor?
People. Just, look, I love, and I tell people, I tell my staff, how many times have I told you guys, power is a gift from the people. Never abuse it, always use it for good. I like being in a position where I could stand up for the dreamers. I said in a press conference the other day, I was at the conference of mayors and with 20 of the top mayors in the country, kind of celebrating my year as president of the conference, and I started talking about the dreamers, and I got emotional, and I started, to cry, and I said, These people come to me all the time and they say to me, you know, Mr. Villaraigosa, you know, you're my hero, you know, what are you going to do for me? You know, I want to go to college. I can't get tuition and paid for. I want to go and I love this country. I want to participate. When you can help people like that, it's a beautiful thing. So I imagine I'll be able to do it in other ways, but that's probably the best thing. You know, I'm obviously in a big job, and I'm not afraid to use the power to defend people, to defend the poor, to defend immigrants, to defend gays, to defend, you know, what's right. Business, if I think they're not being treated fairly, there's a gift that comes with jobs like that. And I'll miss not being able to pick up the phone and say, hey, you know, I need you to fix this because this is wrong. And it's, you know, but I imagine, you know, when I say I'm writing in the sense that it's not forever or anything.
So just have one more minute. So what question what question could I ask that would irritate you the most? That would say, ah, man, I wish he hadn't asked that question. What's a question that you dislike the most?
Almost nothing. I mean, to be honest, I'll tell you, I get sometimes, you know, a little upset with the press from time to time. Hardly. I mean, I'll tell you, if you've been to a press conference with Bloomberg or Daley or Rahm or or Menino and some of these mayors and me, I've almost never gone off on a reporter. But sometimes, you know, when it's always negative, like you have a positive press conference and you're talking about something really positive and the first question is something negative, you're like thinking, really? Is that what it's come to? That it's always, you know, cynicism at its, you know. So I think what I get upset with from time to time are cynical questions, because I'm still a believer. I'm 59, I'm going to be 60 in January, and I'm still a believer. I believe in this country. I believe in our democracy. I believe in our kids. I still have a lot of little boy in me, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to be one of these guys that just thinks the media's horrible, government's horrible, the church is horrible, you know, the business is horrible, you know. I mean, what do we come to if we don't believe in anything anymore? I'm still a believer. You know, I want to, you know, I still believe that most people are good.
So, well, with that, Mayor Villaraigosa, 41st Mayor of Los Angeles, thanks for coming to Loyola Marymount. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I tried to ask as many of your questions as possible, but I left a few out. But if there's some people out there, he's got a couple of minutes, but we gotta run.
Actually, I really do have pretty much at the end of my time, and I'm sorry that it went back and forth. We couldn't get enough of the questions. I do want to thank you.
We did have their questions. A lot of those questions, all the questions you hated, they asked.
I didn't hate any of the questions, but I do want to say this. I hope that you mentioned public safety, transportation, education. I tell people, you know, obviously greening the city and this issue of public education has to be front and center for us. It shouldn't be partisan. It's got to be at the top of our agenda. We got to invest in people again. We got to educate people. You know, if we do that, America will continue to be the beacon of light and hope in the world. If we don't, we will lose very rapidly that beam of light that we give to everybody. And it is the big challenge facing us. And I'm hoping whoever that in the second term that the president will be able to continue. By the way, many of the things we're doing, he is absolutely in sync with. 100%. You know, race to the top, seniority and tenure challenge. I mean, this administration understands if we lose these kids, we lose the future. So thank you so much.